I'm rolling on my end, and we'll see if we have, Emmy jumping around in the background, jingling on command.
Yeah, she's
like right there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's just going to be throughout the whole episode. So up, and a little bit of whining too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those unaware, which is everyone but Ben and I, Emmy just got spayed finally yesterday. Originally, she was supposed to get spayed back in the end of February. I think it was like February 26th. I think that date will forever be burned into my memory because of it.
Yeah.
And ended up not getting spayed. So finally did yesterday. And we had her dew claws removed, which I know isn't, dew claws are supposed to be removed if you're going to have them removed when they're 6 weeks old or younger, when they're just born, kind of puppy stage. And it's not necessarily bad for them to have them as long as they're tight against their forearm. It's when they're loose and easily snagged.
A little thumb claw kind of thing that hangs back. Is that, yeah.
Yep. So I was okay kind of keeping them or getting rid of them. They're a pain because so much fur grows around them and it's very difficult to get at or tedious to get at with the clippers to trim them because they would just keep growing. They don't get trimmed down naturally because they don't
hit the pavement.
Exactly. So they ended up getting removed mainly because of hiking and stuff. The last thing that I want is that she gets one of her dew claws snagged on a branch or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it rips. And then it's a whole ordeal and she's in a ton of pain. And God forbid it's when we're out camping and we're far away from a vet that we know or can trust or whatever, or even get to in that situation. But yeah, so she is still feeling a little bit groggy and drugged up, but she's not
drugged
quite.
Up Puppies.
Yeah.
There we go. There's a possible title for the episode. Yeah, I don't know. It's going along with common theme here. Yeah.
She's being very good with her cone and everything. It's just that when she starts to be a little itchy, wherever, and she can't get at it, she starts to do these wild spins and just kind of freak out. I think she starts whining because she can't. She's in pain. So yeah. So it's a whole ordeal. So I'm sure we'll hear that throughout the next however many minutes this one goes on. Just in the background every so often, her little jingles and wild spasms.
Now when she has a cone on, and if you talk to her, do you hear yourself being echoed back from the cone? She's
such a small puppy that no.
Oh.
I don't have that experience unless I'm I can't say I have that experience.
Or would it just magnify her bark? It's just a bark magnifier. It's just sending that bark to, it's like having the cups with the string attached.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so
what kind of recovery are they saying until she gets the cone off and the all clear and all that?
They say about 10 to 14 days.
Okay.
It kind of all depends. I actually have to take her bandages off her arms or front legs.
Yeah, it's always a weird one. It's they kind of are arms or their legs. I don't know. It's a tough one to what do we call these things? Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with arms because it just seems more correct. I gotta take her bandages off later on today. But again, I was working on taking them off earlier today and I just stopped because it was starting to irritate me. So they shaved her stomach. That way they could do the surgery without hair, contaminants. And then they also shaved some of her arm for the IV that she had.
Yes. Yeah.
And okay, I get that. But then because I don't know exactly how they go about the dew claws with removing them, if it's just pulling a tooth where you just get the root, or if you just clip it to the base and then cauterize it.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure which direction they go or what the actual procedure is for that. But regardless, they put bandages around. That's all fine, but they also used a bandage towards the top that is truly sticky around the bottom side, like typical tape. And it's all stuck to her fur. I'm like, guys, come on. She's already in pain. She's already not feeling good. So, and she's very particular with her front paws, where she just doesn't, like, when she goes to shake, it's a very quick, like, tap and go. Like, tap and go kind of deal. Yes, Emmy, I hear you. And so it's just really unfortunate how they did that. So it's going to take me a little while to get the bandages off of her, at least that taped around section, so that I'm not pulling her hair or hurting her any further.
You almost wonder if there's something like put like have some sort of like oil or something there just to kind of ease off the adhesive or something. But just like all the talk about like whether it's like the trimming off the claws or pulling off the bandage, like all of that, it's just like, man, I just feel that like it's that's not no. And it's unfortunate too, because like a lot of people are still in that mindset that, oh, it's just a dog. Like she doesn't they don't feel pain as we do. They don't have the conscious thought that we do, that kind of ordeal, that kind of mindset around things. I'm like, you don't see her right now. Yeah. Like she is not at all herself. She is clearly uncomfortable at the very least. And she's like yesterday, she's confused. Like she comes home, she's groggy. She has this weird apparatus around her head that is stopping her from doing the things that she wants to be doing. Everything is very uncertain. Like we can at least, when we come out of surgery from whatever, we can we have an understanding of what's going on. Yeah. Even if we don't feel right. Like we can deal with all of that. But they can't, because they just don't have that understanding. But anyway. Yeah, that's one of the things where it's just, you wish you'd have the ability to, communicate with them on a level to, just have a little better understanding of things. But also in some ways, for a lot of things, it's the anticipation that's the worst part. Yeah. And at least from their standpoint, they have no clue what's coming. They don't have the anticipation, just the aftermath. But if you just think about how many things, it's just the anticipation of dreading something. Like if we were going into surgery for something, I mean, not like together at the same time, that would be weird. But like,
are you saying right now that you would not give me your kidney?
So we are on the record, and I don't know what to think about that. But yeah, like if you had a surgery coming up, like let's say you were having like you say, like a kidney operation or like that, you're going to know about that months in advance, and then it comes up and then you're going to be thinking about it, dreading it, all that. But at the same time, if you're just kind of like knocked out, you wake up, here's your kidney. It's like, well, yeah, that's going to suck. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know. It is a weird thing, but yeah, it would be nice if there was some way to actually be able to communicate with them about some stuff like that. But I don't know. Yeah, good times.
Yeah. So, but I mean, other than that, the only other thing really is Vermont trip has come and gone.
Yeah, how was that?
It was really nice. Really, really nice.
So how long were you there for?
We left around 4:00 in the afternoon on Friday, and then came back Monday morning. We left. Okay. So, which Friday night driving there was so bad. Like it wasn't like traffic wise was bad. It was just that, I mean, it's a 6-hour drive turned to about 7-ish hours. Because of stopping, especially with Emmy, getting food, that kind of deal. Yeah. And then you're driving like the last 3 hours in an unknown place in the middle of the night.
Yeah. When you don't have landmarks and you just see the road in front of you. And yeah, that definitely does get to be a bit odd. Though I will say that when you wake up to a whole new world, the next day in daylight, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. It was cool, like going back through those roads. The real local ones while we were there, and then driving back home on Monday to see that similar pathway that we had taken just in daylight was pretty cool to see. But coming back was even worse because
We had torrential downpours on and off.
Oh.
I think we passed like 5 different accidents.
Oh, geez.
Just because of people hydroplaning. Like there was at least 1 or 2 young girls who had hydroplaned into like the median.
Yeah.
And then we also saw there was also a box truck that crashed into the pillar of a bridge underneath it and was blocking 2 out of the 3 lanes on the left hand on the other side.
Yikes.
Yeah. So not fun stuff at all to like see or deal with. It was definitely very you definitely had to be paying attention to what you were doing as you were driving home.
Yeah. And that's a long drive to be constantly on guard, on edge. And because for the long drives, all that stuff I do, it's more deserty stuff where it's open highway and you're just driving along, you're on autopilot a little bit, but to think about going for the longer rides like that, but where you're just constantly vigilant about things, that would really wear me out.
Yeah, I mean, we left around 8:30 or so, got home around 3:30. So again, about 7 hours, something like that. And I was just done for the day. Yeah. Like I could feel my mood didn't shift as much as it usually does when I'm coming back from vacations. Cause like when I go up to my family's cabin, especially when it's like for a week and you have all of that, like just slower pace filled with solitude, just really actually being able to enjoy living the way that you would like to be living, what feels more natural to you. Yeah. And then you come back home, and even on the drive home, I can always feel my attitude shift. Like I'm coming back towards people, to traffic and the usual crowds and just the hustle and bustle and all of that. And it's just bad. It's a bad shift. Like my girlfriend always comments on it. Which, speaking of that, I can't even say girlfriend anymore because we got engaged this weekend.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's because I was listening to. So we're recording this a day after the conversation you had with Andrew came out, and you guys were chatting a little bit on that, and it sounds like you're now that I know this, it sounds like you're probably talking around a little bit about you knew that there was something going to be happening in your future. Yep. Yeah. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, it went very well. I had it planned out for pretty much the past month. And just keeping it from her, especially because, so like I had about a month ago or so, I had texted my cousin, and my cousin and I get together at least once a month to play board games and all of that. And we've always been pretty close. So I texted him and I was like talking about the whole thing. And then my girlfriend and I are very open about sharing our phones, like going through our phones. We know each other's passwords and all that kind of thing. We don't hide anything from each other in that regard. But every so often, like before holidays or birthdays or so, or events like this, it's one of those things of, all right, don't go on my phone because I don't want you seeing these conversations. And of course that opened up the whole can of worms of, oh, well, why?
Yeah.
and she deals with anxiety as well. So like anytime that I say that, if it's not around like a holiday or I don't give her an exact reason, then it's always like eating her at her. So I'm like, all right, well, I got to tell her. So I'm just like thinking more seriously about proposing. And then, of course, that opened up an even bigger can of worms. And so I was very surprised that I was able to pull it off like I did, in that she didn't expect it for that day, because I did it on the Saturday, so the first full day that we were up there. And Brenda was great in helping me to pick out a hike for it. She helped me to take the photographs of the actual engagement and everything, so we have that documented, which is something that I had always wanted as well.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because as we're going along this little hike, she's asking me, oh, have you talked to the jeweler or anything? Like, have you thought of a design for the ring? Like all of this kind of stuff. And the entire time I'm just like lying to her, saying, oh no, I haven't gotten on it. I plan to after I get back from Washington. Yeah. Then I'll seriously get on it and all of that. And we go up there, I propose, and then the entire rest of the weekend, she was like, both in utter disbelief that she was now my fiance.
Yeah.
And also at the other side of things, like, just couldn't believe that I had been lying to her not 20 minutes before I did it. Yeah. So, like I said, it was a beautiful trip. It was great in all regards. The proposal went very well. We went out to dinner, and then, yeah. So I just cannot believe that it's already been a week since having left. It's been almost a week since we got back at this point, almost, and just, yeah, I'd rather be up there.
Yeah. So, and you had mentioned, one of the reasons for going up there was to get a little more of a sense of the place up there. Did it match your expectations?
That and more.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, where Brenda's at is a very quaint little town. She was actually telling us, so obviously while we were there, she was showing us around a little bit, telling us more about Vermont as a whole, and as well as that area that she's living. And she was saying that this place is one of the first in the entire country where kindergarten through 6th grade is in Vermont, and then 7 through 12 for high school is in New Hampshire, because they border each other that closely. It's just like not even a 10-minute distance from each other.
Interesting.
And because the two towns are just they're so small that they were like, yeah, well, we can't really have a school in each town that's worthwhile,
Yeah.
So I think when we looked it up, it was something like 300 kids through pretty much the entire K through 6 school.
Oh, wow.
Which is a group of math classes that are taught in this area that I'm in now.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think about. But Vermont as a whole, the very slow pace of life, the fact that they have a general store, like, to me, that's just like, there's no Walmarts or fast food chains in sight. There's a Starbucks in the New Hampshire town, but past that, everything is like small business. Everything is just very quaint.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is fantastic.
That sounds very nice.
Yeah. I mean, add to that, Brenda was also saying that certain counties in Vermont require that you buy at least 5 acres of land. You can't have lots smaller than that. I'm like, that's perfect. I want at least 5 acres. Like, I don't want to be able to see my neighbor's house next door if I can help it. So, yeah, it's definitely given us a lot to think about in terms of like the fact that we could actually see ourselves living up there. It's not terribly far from home. I mean, it's a shitty drive, but it's not unrealistic for us. So, yeah,
and it sounds like there could be. I mean, if you did end up, at some point moving up there, it sounds like the two of you could perhaps have careers that would be compatible with that style of living, this more small town.
Yeah,
I would imagine that for some people, I guess if you're self-employed, if you're working remote, that's obviously that's fine. But I'd imagine that it is a bit more limiting with regard to some of the industries and stuff where you could, find a decent job there. But it's great that there's a lot of small business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's so very different from what I'm accustomed to. Even just the fact that, you have, the elementary school and stuff on one side, and then the other school and the other, across the state line. It's like, if I want to cross a state line here, I got to drive like 15 hours north, or heading to the east is quicker. But it's still going to be like, a few hours, 2-3 hours or something like that. But it just, I don't know. It feels like a whole different world to live in that sort of environment. But that does sound very nice.
Yeah, I mean, that the whole different world feel is really nice. That's what I like about it so much. Like, it just doesn't feel like anything that we have or that I have access to, even in Pennsylvania. Like, I'm sure if you go central PA, even western PA, you can get some glimpses of that. But at the same time, you're looking at the thing with where we were at is that on the New Hampshire side, it was a college town. So it was a very young, bustling sort of small town feel. I mean, we'll see how things go over the course of the next few years. It's definitely an area that I want to check out more of, spend a little bit more time in, see a little bit more of like northern Vermont, because this was on the southern side. And
do you have a feeling for how cost of living compares there to where you are now?
So I can speak at least on cost of property up there compared down here. So we were walking over in one of the towns and we saw, and this is something that you don't see all the time either, which is pretty cool. So in one of the windows of, I think it was just one of the real estate buildings that they had there, they had local listings for different property, different houses. Yeah. Almost like a physical Craigslist of sorts. Yeah. And Mel and I were just looking at these listings just for the fun of it. And I think there was like a 65-acre plot of land, no house or anything built on it, but about 65 acres, I think within a half hour or so commute of the town for $250,000. I'm like, I couldn't, if I wanted that in PA from at least the parts of PA that I know, which is mainly eastern, I would need to go up towards where my family's property is, towards the border of New York. And I could probably get that for probably not that much land for that cheap, but generally speaking, probably around 50 acres for the 300,000 mark or so. Yeah. But I'd be in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. I would have no choice but to work remote. I wouldn't have the access to the just the general amenities that these two towns have because they're so well established. Yeah. Like they may not have the Walmarts and the bigger known brands of stores, but they still have pretty much everything that you need. I mean, the general store in the Vermont town, its slogan is along the lines of if we don't have it, you don't need it. Yeah. And just walking through the store, it's like a giant general store. I'm like, yeah, you have pretty much everything that I could possibly need. And if not, Amazon is a click away. But yeah, so the cost of living seems within reach, more reasonable, depending on what kind of job you're able to get than what could be had closer to the city areas. But like I said, still something that we have to work and plan towards, and maybe we'll get lucky and the market will crash in right around the same time that we're ready to make a move, and that'll make everything even better. Yeah,
it's always interesting seeing those comparisons of how far, a dollar goes in the various places. Like in my neighborhood, I mean, the houses were built in the 1950s. Most of it's not tract homes. They're the area where I am. It was one point like a ranch area. Yeah. And then the property was divided up and then sold off, and then houses were built. So it's a little, it's not cookie cutter. Each house is a little bit different in some ways. And on the block where I am, my neighbor's house was, so basically the lot that we're on right now is subdivided to three lots from one lot. And my neighbor, they had there was horses on this land and stuff, which is kind of crazy to think about, in San Diego area. And so as a result, the soil in their backyard and the neighbors, they moved away a little while ago. They're, getting to be a bit more elderly and stuff, but they were the original owners, and the soil in their backyard is still very good for gardening and stuff because that's where the horses were. Yeah. But it's just crazy because we have the tiniest lot on our block. I mean, it's, chiseled from one normal size lot. So we have a tiny, tiny little spot. But just looking at like what, especially the neighboring houses, what they're worth, having the bigger lots, it's just absolutely crazy to see what. I mean, I look at our house, I'm like, it's not worth that much. Whatever Zillow says or whatever. Yeah. And it just the thought of being able to buy, a good amount of land for a fraction of what a tiny little house sells for in Southern California. Yeah. I definitely can see how that lifestyle that comes with that, and the quiet, calm sort of stuff. I definitely see how that would be something to look forward to and to aim for and all that. So that's, that's pretty cool.
I even think about the fact that in the past 4 years that it's been since COVID hit and house prices have skyrocketed and all of that, we've had in the area that I'm at right now, we have about, I think, 6 acres of property, and we're surrounded by, or on one side and in front of us, there was farmland, and there's a house behind us and 2 houses to the left of us. And one of those houses to the left of us had popped up during that 4-year span.
Yeah.
And one of the farms in front of us, at least a section of it, was bought by someone, and they built a house up there, which has created it's not a terrible eyesore, but it's still an eyesore when you're used to a view for 10 years that didn't have a house there, and now it does.
Yeah.
And the house that house in particular that's in front of us was like $1 million house.
Yeah.
Which compared to the rest of the houses around us isn't like, it's about double what the other houses around us were marketed at, which of course that house going up has raised the prices of our house, and the price of the houses around us, the market has raised.
Yeah.
And by about like 300,000, it's about doubled. And I think about that, like I would not be able to, nor would I be willing to buy the house that I live in now. Even my parents wouldn't. The house that I live in now, with as little property as there is in the area that we're in, for the price that it's worth.
Yeah.
It is absolutely insane, especially now comparing it to something like what you can get if you're willing or able to work in a remote setting, or up there specifically. The town is really employed by a Ivy League college and the healthcare settings that are around it. So that for me is an option. And then for Mel, she's able to work at the high school level, or one of those schools, whatever. So it's wild to think like just how drastically different this whole country is, state by state, let alone within each individual state, and how things have changed over the years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, one of the, do you ever go on Zillow and just kind of look at houses? Is that anything you ever do, just to kind of see how far the money goes in certain areas?
I've been doing it in this area as other houses have popped up.
Yeah,
just to kind of get an idea, get a feel for everything, which just always leaves me feeling disgusted.
It is. I will say though that there is a certain threshold, which is interesting to see in different areas. There's a point where the houses start getting a little bit nicer, and it's like, oh, this is good. This is good. And then once the price crosses over a certain threshold, then you go to the point where the person has so much money, they also have really poor taste, and they have people will come in and they'll just do whatever work it is that the homeowner is telling them to do, even though it looks horrendous.
Yeah.
Like there is, it is kind of sad where that line of like, oh, this is a nice house, I'd love to have this house, everything looks great, this is fantastic, is a very unachievable limit here in Southern California. Like if I'm looking on Zillow, I'm like, oh, this is like my dream house right here. What is it? It's like $1.6 million. Okay, yeah, so that's not going to happen. But here, at least, once you cross over like 1.9 to 2 million, then you have medieval castles. Like you'll see like a person who has, they change the whole interior of the house to look like it is like the big blocks of granite that like a castle is made of, and there's like suits of armor, and then there's like these canopy beds that are like fixed to it. Like you cross
So it's
this
just-
threshold. It's insane.
So it's just a guy, or it's an individual who has so much money that this is like their third or fourth house, and they're just like, you know what? I'm going to build the house that my 5-year-old self would have loved to live
Yes. And it's a person that no one says no to. And,
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
like the person coming in the tiling says, yes, I think this would be a great idea, you know?
in. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My opinion costs an additional $10,000.
Yes. But it'd be interesting to see like where that limit is in various places. But at least in this area, I find that once you cross over 2 million, you go to crazy town. But
Yeah.
when you're a little bit less than that, then you have a person who's listening to the feedback of a designer and all that sort of stuff. And but yeah. So that's just another thing I've noticed.
That reminds me that there was a house that we passed by up in Vermont that Brenda was telling us about that is like a $1.6 million house for that area. Not a ton of property or anything great to it. A little bit larger of a house. I couldn't really get a good look at it, and I don't have the listing or anything to really look at it. But she was telling us that it's just exactly like you were saying, just one of those super bourgeois kind of houses, very exotic wood tiling on the floor, and very like the guy that built it pretty much picked out the most exotic elements to make this house that he possibly could, imported it from various countries, and just made it so that it was just really, really stupid expensive for no reason other than for it to be really stupid expensive.
Yeah.
And it's struggling. Like, it's been on the market for quite a while now. It's been dropping in price because the guy's struggling to sell it, because nobody up in that area wants any of that. It looks god awful, and it's not worth that kind of money to anyone up there.
Yeah.
So it's like you said,
I think there's some life lessons there, you know.
Exactly, aren't there?
I always do enjoy just going through and seeing what's out there, and sometimes you get a little more of appreciation for the the shoebox that I live in. I was just thinking how so last time we recorded, I had just come back from the backpacking trip, and I realized that there's one thing I forgot to mention there, and I think there's a few people that are curious about it. So I did wear the barefoot shoes when I went on the backpacking trip, and they, before going on that trip, I'd used them for some test hikes. I had even gone to Disneyland back in April wearing them, where I did some pretty high step count days, and they were just fine for that. So I decided, hey, let's give them a go ahead on the backpacking trip. And so my first day in the field was right around 39,000 steps. And that's with the pack on. And a lot of what I was walking over was kind of like a gravelly rock sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And the shoes did very well on the hike, and I didn't really have any real complaints. I didn't really have any sand or rocks or anything get inside them from walking through deeper sand areas, because they kind of fasten around your ankles pretty well. There was one really annoying thing though, which was the insoles in the shoes. They had a tendency to slide backwards. Where I'm walking along, and all of a sudden, like, my toes feel the edge of the front of the insole, which has shifted back about an inch or so.
Interesting.
And so I'd have to, stop, take off my boot, slide the insole forward, tighten it down a little bit more, and eventually it would do a bit better. But just that feeling of that edge of them was a little bit annoying. So they had a tendency to do that, and I'm tempted to find some way to adhere them in there a little bit better. And in terms of adding, giving extra sensory input on the hike, it does. Though I will say that on my hike out of the canyon, after a few days of that, the front of my feet were definitely getting a little tender, to the point where there's a couple times I stepped on a rock. I'm like, that was a bit much. And I think part of it is my feet having to get used to it a little bit more.
Right.
But on the hike out, since the front of my feet were a little bit tender, I would end up walking more on my heels, which is kind of defeating the purpose of wearing them.
Yeah.
Though I think having the backpack as well ends up
Definitely change things.
Yeah, because there's the added weight of that. I think it was maybe like 35 pounds or so for the backpack. So not crazy heavy or anything, but it just changes the dynamics and stuff. But they worked well overall. I do plan on using them again the next time I go backpacking. I think it is a matter of my feet having to become just a little bit more accustomed to it. But even just like on a normal day, if you're to hike, nearly 40,000 steps, and it was about 8 miles to hike into where I was camping, and then I'd hiked around quite a bit that day. So I ended up having, I think it was about 18 miles of hiking on that first day. Even just like on a normal day, if you're walking that much, your feet are probably gonna be a little sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
But they did well. I was happy with them. But yeah, it was toward the end of the trip when I hiked out of the canyon. It was a cloudy day, and so there wasn't really any point of me being in the canyon. So I hiked back to my truck and kind of relaxed there for a day. Then I hiked back into the canyon for one final photo on the final day of my trip. And I wore my other hiking boots for that, just to see how they compared. And I think it's because my feet were still a little bit tender, but I could still. It wasn't dramatically different with the regular hiking boots.
Mm-hmm.
So. But I don't know. It was a good experiment. I do plan on having those again. And those were from Vivo. It was the name of the Vivo Barefoot is the name of the shoes I had. But yeah, I was pretty happy with them. I don't know if you have anything else before we get to the artist of the week.
Yeah, I have one other thing that I can actually talk about, but only because of the fact that this is getting released after I come back from the Palouse.
Okay.
So, for those who are keeping up with Fuji and the GFX system and the lenses there,
mm-hmm.
the Fuji GF 500mm 5.6 was finally announced a little bit earlier this month. Speaking about like May, I think it was May 16th for their summit.
Mm-hmm.
It was announced, and people will be able to have it in their hands come middle of June, right around the when this episode actually goes live. Convenient enough. Well, somehow I was able to get my hands on one, and it just arrived today.
What?
Yeah.
That's very cool.
I am still a little shocked, surprised that I was able to pull it off, but I pulled some strings a little bit. And so with this Palouse trip, the biggest thing is needing a telephoto lens. Like I think I had mentioned before, when I was talking to John Peterson about this trip, I asked him about gear recommendation, because this is a location I've never been to before. And he mentioned how he typically uses essentially a 850mm to 1000mm equivalent lens or setup between the crop body that he uses, the teleconverters, and the zoom lens that he uses, which I can't get anywhere close to on medium format digital. Really couldn't get anywhere close to that with large format either, if I was still utilizing that.
Yeah,
That's
large
way
format's
out there.
really tough for that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking, okay, how can I at least get close to, like, around 300mm would be nice to have for this. I have 50 megapixels. I can crop in. I'm not afraid to if I need to. And so I'm also, I went on to Lens Rentals. I'm renting the Pentax 645 400mm lens to adapt, since I already have the proper adapter for that system. And that's actually arriving tomorrow, I believe. And then, like I said, I pulled some strings and got in contact with Fuji and was like, hey, so I heard that, and this was, mind you, this was before the GF 500 was even announced. They hadn't done their summit yet. But I knew from rumors that it was coming, and from their own lineup, I knew that it was coming. And so I emailed them, and I'm like, hey, any chance I can get my hands on this for this trip? Like, I had no idea at that point when it was being released or available to purchase or whatever. And they were like, yeah, sure, we'll have it to you by the 31st of May.
Oh, wow.
A couple days prior to your trip, get acclimated with it. I have to ship it back to them on, I think, the 12th of June. So I think that's 2 days after I get back. It's wild. It's truly wild. But I have a couple ideas for articles that I will be writing while I'm on the trip, and then once I get back, kind of just practical review of the lens, comparing the two lenses, the Pentax lens to the Fuji, for different options for people, and a couple other article ideas that I have in store for this. But yeah, it's something.
Yeah, that's very cool. So do you have I haven't even seen like a picture of the lens. Is it got a fair amount of weight to it, or is it one of the things where it feels heavier or lighter than you would think based on the appearance? Or how would you describe that?
So I mean, it's a big lens. I sat it aside of my Pentax 120 macro, and that always has the kip-on adapter on it for this. Mm-hmm. And it is maybe a third of the size bigger than that. Almost double what the lens would be if it didn't have the adapter on, mm-hmm. in terms of height. So it is it's a chunky boy, but it doesn't feel it. It's very well balanced, especially on the body. Like, obviously you can tell that you're carrying such a big lens, but from the very, very, very little bit that I've played with it prior to us recording here, its autofocus is pretty quick given the medium format system, which isn't known for a fast autofocus anyway. And operation just seems pretty solid with it. So it's definitely going to be weird utilizing a lens, such a long telephoto lens. I mean, it's about 400 millimeter equivalent.
Yeah.
I've never photographed with a lens longer than 200 millimeters. And even then, I really didn't use it much when I had one for the Sony.
And certainly for where you're going, I think that's really good. It'll be great to be immersed in that environment and to have that lens as a tool available to, see what sort of compositions and stuff you can find there. That sounds very cool.
Yeah. I mean, the only downside is the other thing that I tried to get alongside of this lens was the GFX 50R, just because it, again, dream rangefinder camera setup that I would love to play around with. But mm-hmm. It was also because I know the Palouse is pretty dusty, and you have to be careful with switching lenses to not get dust on the sensor. And because of how I plan on doing these comparisons, I want to do it right, or as right as one could, where I set up a composition with the 500 mil, because that's the longer one. I'll set up a composition with that, and then switch the lenses over after I take a photograph, so that I have a photograph on both the 500 mil and the 400 that's similar enough in composition. So I'd like to have two camera bodies for that, but at this point, I don't think I'm going to be able to. So, but I mean, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to the trip. I'm looking forward to playing around with an unreleased lens for the first time in my career. That's just pretty cool. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, very cool. That'll be exciting for you, and it'll be cool to see what you're able to do with that and on the trip, which is going to be coming up here very soon.
Yeah, it will.
So figured it was a good time to do our artist of the week.
Yeah.
I was flipping through Instagram before we started recording, because I realized it was my time to have someone, and I didn't. So I was scrolling like a madman, and that's usually when I end up finding someone who I've had my eye on for a while, and it just so happens that they just happen to post a picture. I'm like, perfect person. So I found Blake Farrell, and so on Instagram, username Blake.Farrell, Farrell, and landscape photography, a lot of small-ish scenes. I mean, it's not as though they're all small scene photos, but a lot of photos of, trees and forests and stuff like that. Not a lot of grand landscapes. So there's a few kind of bigger scenes in there. A lot of misty photos, some interesting photos of reflections on water. There is one in particular that really caught my eye. Looks like he posted it on February 20th. It's a surface of water with some natural oils there, and there's kind of this arc that extends between the patches of the oil there. And what's interesting about that one is the fact that the water has ripples on it. And usually you're going to see the oil stuff on very still water. And that one has some really nice contrast in it.
It's really funny. I pulled that one too.
Yeah.
That's one of the few one of the many, I should say, that caught my attention. I'm always fascinated. I was talking a little bit about this with Andrew too, with natural oils. It's not something that I have ever seen in the wild before, but I keep seeing more and more people photographing them, and I keep getting more and more jealous.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to photograph natural oils in black and white.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's and the thing about the natural oil stuff, at least where I found it in Zion, is you have to be at a very particular angle. And you typically have to have a pretty long lens, which I can totally understand why Andrew will use the long lens with the extension tubes, because if you're hovering right over the top of it, sometimes you're getting your own reflection in the way.
Right.
So if you can be off at a little bit of a distance and zoom in, and then you can just pick the perfect angle, it helps. But it is such a very cool subject. And I have a few photos where I have a little bit of the oils, but I have yet to find one where I can get my camera in at just the right angle. And oftentimes it's really small scenes you're photographing too, which is also a bit difficult for working with large format. But yeah, Blake has some really cool misty forest scenes. There's a photo he posted on April 5th, 2022. It's a ice photo, and it has like this central shape to it, and then there's kind of feathery bluish ice areas around it where it has just a really surreal, interesting look. And I think he may have flipped it upside down for the presentation, which is why it has even more of a almost kind of a 3D effect to it. But really, really beautiful work. Looking at some of these forest scenes, I would definitely want to wander through some of those forests. It just seems very, very calm and peaceful, which is really, really nice.
Yeah. I'm always drawn to the very intimate scenes. I find my eye being caught by pretty much the same sort of subjects that are photographed by whichever photographers we're looking at. And there's one that he has titled Frozen Chia Pet from January 16th. It's a little bush or collection of grass, something along those lines, that's encapsulated by ice. And you see like the frosted tips of it.
That is. It almost looks like an aerial photo.
Yeah,
of like a tree from above on like a frozen lake or something like that.
And then there's also another one, just very simple photograph, kind of almost stereotypical of intimate scene photographers, of a red maple leaf frozen, encapsulated by ice, that he would post on February 29th. That's another just really nice one. I like the cool tones against the very red saturated leaf, and the various little, almost like cuttings in the ice, it seems like. Adds a nice little bit of play to it. But yeah.
And the other thing too, I also wanted to mention was how when I'm just browsing through and looking for a photographer to highlight, when just scrolling through all the work and all the images are cohesive, even though you have some variety in subject matter, whether it's a close-up photo or a forest photo or even a larger scene, but it's very cohesive. And you could have, these images laid out in a book, and it would feel very continuous throughout. So I think that's another that sense of consistency is something that's really, really nice when it comes to the work of a photographer.
I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com, and you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.